Well, welcome to our awesome presentation this afternoon. We have even people coming from our neighborhood. I didn't catch exactly the name, but I said we should remind ourselves of Mr. Rogers, who is your neighbor. Can we be neighbors to each other? So we're trying to make stuff that is a little bit more casual, not just churchy stuff. And we are starting this series of lectures on health. How to learn, how to live healthier, how to adapt our life in this toxic world. And I've been doing functional medicine over 30 years, and there were many people that I was working with in my life. And one of my students was Andjela Subotic, who happened to live in proximity with me all the time. And she was my best student ever, because I'm absolutely stunned how much she learned, how much she advanced in a short time. Her first degree is in biochemistry. She has a BA in biochemistry. And her very inquisitive mind couldn't stop with that, as she finished master's degree in opera singing. My humble opinion that she's the best opera singer in the world. I cannot prove that, but to my ear she is. And maybe she's going to sing something for the lecture. I'm not sure what kind of surprise she made for us. And then she finished a doctorate degree in naturopathic medicine. And in the crisis of the last few years, you can imagine how busy we were. I mean, last year alone, there were hundreds of people coming to us, especially with Omicron and all the stuff. So we had to deal with a lot of influx of these cases and how to help them to recover naturally. But today will be a very practical subject, minimizing toxins around us. Most of us are not even aware how much we're bombarded every single day. If you ever hear from somebody saying, oh, I suddenly got a cancer, nobody gets suddenly anything. It's being accumulated over the years. So I had an insight in these slides and all the lecture. We brainstormed all this stuff last few days. I think it's an amazing lecture. There will be time for questions and answers after that. And Andjela just putting her headset on. There will be time to ask some questions, but the whole idea is to make you aware of so many toxins around us and what we can do about it to have better life. It's not about, somebody told me today I got prepared for the lecture. I'll be ready to listen. It's not about any kind of judgment or any kind of guilt feelings, how you feel. It's just a lecture how to learn to live wiser in this world. And there's some stuff she's going to present that you may not have thought about, but maybe you will after today. So let's welcome Dr. Andjela Subotic to the lecture. Yeah, let's just bow our heads and pray before we start our lecture. Lord, thank you for giving us this chance to serve you, not just in the worship service, but to look at the aspects of real life and what we can do to serve you in our mind, body, and spirit. And thank you for giving Dr. Andjela spirit to prepare this lecture, enthusiasm, and thank you for all this audience today. Help us to learn, grow. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Ray. It's always funny to thank my husband, but thank you for the introduction. We've been talking about doing something, a health lecture like this for a long time, but it's always hard to find the right topic. And when we're talking about health, we can go in so many different ways. So, I was thinking, when we think about physical health, we usually put our minds toward food and the types of foods that we're eating. And we're always talking about eating our vegetables, the plant-based diet, and things like that, which obviously are great. But my goal today is to broaden your minds to think about everything around us, because we're affected by everything around us. And I'm only going to stick to physical things, our physical health, but obviously we're affected by people as well, and energies and all kinds of things. So thank you for joining me on this journey today as we talk about minimizing the daily toxins around us. Just a small disclaimer, I am not a medical doctor. This is not medical advice. Please don't misconstrue this as any medical advice. And also, I will be mentioning a lot of organizations, products, websites, different things in this lecture, and I just want you all to be aware that this is all for informational purposes. I'm not affiliated with any product, any website, any organization that I will be speaking about. A little bit about me. Ray told you about my background when it comes to education and my degrees, but I thought it would be important for you to know my personal physical journey with health. I was born and raised in Northwest Indiana, so not far from here, about an hour and 15 minutes away or so, very close to Gary, Indiana. So a lot of steel mills around. I think our home was probably less than 5 miles away from the closest steel mill. So obviously a very toxic environment, very polluted. My parents also had a lot of friends over that would smoke in the home. They at some point were smokers as well. So I grew up in this environment of layers and layers and layers of smoke. Not all the time, but sometimes. Anyhow, when I was 10 years old, I started developing psoriasis on my head, a huge patch of psoriasis on my head. So I'm sitting down as a 4th, 5th grader in class, and I'm just scratching, and it was like snow falling out of my hair all the time. And my mom would take me to the doctor, and they would give me creams and things to put, none of which didn't do anything. Just made my hair look oily, which was even more embarrassing. I already have all these snowflakes falling out, and now I have an oily head. So wonderful. Then later on, I think I was about 16 years old, I started developing arthritis. For a 16-year-old to develop arthritis, now, that's something, huh? I was one of those people, when the weather was changing, I felt it in my hands and feet. My hands would swell like crazy. My feet would swell so bad that I couldn't even put my shoes on. Or as I was walking, it was hard to bend my toes, and it was just extremely painful. And then I also played tennis in high school, and I would try to hold the racket, and I couldn't even put my hand around the racket, how bad my arthritis was. So normally, my mom takes me to the doctor. They prescribed Celebrex, Vioxx, all the things that were eventually taken off the market because they were found to be unsafe. Lovely. I will say that I didn't feel comfortable just intuitively taking these things, so it didn't take me very long just to say to myself, no, this is not the way to go. But that didn't obviously stop me from having these issues, so I continued searching myself, but I didn't really know at that point where to start and what to do. When it came to the types of foods that we were eating at home, there was a lot of processed foods. My mom, she's from the former Yugoslavia. We had home-cooked meals all the time, but there was also a lot of processed foods that we could just grab ourselves. If I woke up before everybody in the morning and was making breakfast, I could pull Aunt Jemima syrup and some buttermilk pancake mix or whatever was available, Pop-Tarts, I have no idea. Cow dairy, we were very big on drinking milk and eating cheese and all kinds of stuff that came from the cow. Gluten, most Europeans love their bread. So bread of all kinds was a huge, huge portion of our meals. And then one thing I'm going to talk about today as well, tap water. We were not drinking anything really other than tap water in the home. And we'll go into details on what is in our tap water here. And now, without using any medications, my psoriasis is gone, my arthritis is gone. Now, I will say that if I'm not taking care of myself, if I slip up, if I am, I don't know, traveling or having a bad week or whatever, and not doing the things that I would normally do to maintain a healthy environment, maintain my health, I will occasionally have a flare-up. But these are far and few between. It's not like how I was when I was a child growing up. My food now consists mostly of organic, non-processed foods. I don't eat anything that comes from the cow. My husband, if you want to ask him later, he'll tell you about a book that talks about cow dairy. I try to be mostly gluten-free. I haven't found any particular reasons why gluten bothers me, but this is, again, another future lecture when we'll talk about food. I think everybody would do well to stay away from gluten in general. And the main thing we'll be talking about, how I changed my life. I tried to minimize the chemical and metal toxins in my everyday environment, including in food, but also everything else that we'll see here. So again, I was able to reverse psoriasis and arthritis, not by medications, but by changing my lifestyle. So this can be a really long lecture series. Obviously, there's many components that we can talk about with this, but I hope this will at least whet your appetite to want to learn more and want to explore more about safer and better alternatives to all the things that we encounter. So some of those products that you see up there, those are currently some products that I use. Clean People, the name of a company that produces like laundry detergents. Seventh Generation, they make a lot of household chemicals. Native, that's one of the brands that I use for deodorant, if someone asks me, you know, about deodorant alternatives. And then Now brand, which in this area you can find a lot of their products in the store, Fruitful Yield. They have things like lotions and personal care products and stuff like that. So just some of the stuff that I use. So God gave all of us the ability, not just me, to heal our own bodies. But we have to do that under the right conditions. And what do we actually need? Pure air, clean water, and wholesome food. But what is our reality today? Something more like garbage soup, I think. Not the nicest image, but it's a pretty close reflection of what we are bombarded with on a daily basis without even really thinking about it. The next slide is supposed to be a series that pops up. I'm not sure why it's not. There's pictures that pop up one after another. It's kind of an animation. I don't know if I can do it or just skip it. Okay, not working properly. Okay, that's okay. So the first image, which is buried, is of a child sleeping. So even before we wake up in the morning, we're bombarded with toxins as we're sleeping, from the outgassing of the paint on the walls, from the outgassing of the materials of our clothes. You know, many clothes are made with flame retardants that we're breathing in as we're sleeping, or the sheets on our bed, or even the mattress that we sleep on. All of that stuff is outgassing, and we're breathing it in all night, all day. So even before we wake up, we're bombarded with these toxins. When we wake up in the morning, I think most of us will probably go and do things like brush our teeth, wash our face, you know, personal care products, take a shower. With all of these things that we're using, there's more chemicals. The shower, we have the chlorine that's coming from the water, and the hotter the shower, the more chlorine that's released from the water. Then we go and we eat breakfast, and we turn on our stove and use cooking utensils that are coated in chemicals. You get the picture, basically. Just all day long, we're bombarded more and more and more and more. And then what happens? Our body can only take so much. Stress, metals, medicines, foods that don't agree with us, viruses, bacteria. You know, we only start to think about these things once we have symptoms of some kind, an infection, inflammation, allergies, diseases of sorts. But I want you to be mindful that you don't have to get to that point where you're experiencing any symptoms or any diseases. You know, if you try to be mindful of the things around you, maybe you'll never get there. So we look at that tub, and yes, we can maintain some of these things, and God designed our bodies to be able to filter out some of this stuff, but there comes a point where it can't take anymore, and it's overwhelmed, and it just starts to explode. So Dr. Joseph Pizzorno, he's a naturopath, and he's the founding president of Bastyr University, which was the first naturopathic school in the United States. He is the author of many textbooks and many books, one of which I would highly recommend is called The Toxin Solution. You'll learn about a lot of stuff in his book, a lot of things that we'll be talking about today. But he said, I would now assert that the primary driver of chronic disease in the industrialized world is environmental toxins. We are poisoning ourselves with metals and chemicals. And that's why we're all here today. So toxins enter our body in 3 ways. We breathe them in, we swallow them, we ingest them, which is the primary source of contamination. And we can also absorb them through our skin and through our eyes. Now, the skin is our main protective barrier, but it still is very absorbable. As I was preparing for this lecture, I read that something close to 60% of what we actually apply on our skin gets absorbed. And when it is absorbed, it goes directly to the bloodstream. When we swallow something, it gets filtered through our organs, and you know, our organs can sometimes flush things out. Our liver, our kidneys, that's what they're designed to do. But when it enters our bloodstream, there's no filtering. It just goes directly into the blood. So these are some of the basic things that I will cover today: air, water, personal care products, household products, a little bit of food, heavy metals, and at the very end, we'll talk about cleansing and detoxifying. Although don't wait for the end to pay attention on what to do, because throughout, there's very important things that we need to be mindful of. So air. It would be ideal for us to be outside in fresh air all the time, in mountains, around water where we have clean ions. But that, unfortunately, is not the reality for most of us. Just like we are indoors now, we spend most of our time indoors. So how can we then pay attention to our indoor air quality to minimize the toxins indoors? Well, number one, we have our HVAC systems, our heating, ventilating. We need to be mindful to keep those filters clean, maintain those systems. Cleaning the house. I mean, we all clean because we know it's good, but removing dust and dirt constantly is a way for us to not be always inhaling what we're around on a daily basis. Something that all of us in this area need to be mindful of is radon. That picture of the United States there, all of those states in red are very high in radon. And Radon is a radioactive gas. It comes from the Earth's crust. It's not something that you can see or smell. It's colorless, odorless, tasteless. There's really no way to know if it's entering your home. So everybody in this area who is a homeowner, if you haven't done a radon inspection, I very much encourage you to do a radon inspection. And what they do if they find that you have a lot of radon getting into the home is something called radon mitigation. It's a whole process. And there's many places around here that do that. So I didn't know that the EPA considers radon exposure to be the #1 cause of lung cancer among people who don't smoke. So even if you're doing the right thing and not smoking cigarettes, just something like having constant radon exposure in your home can give you lung cancer. More ways that we're exposed to indoor air pollutants. Combustion from stoves, ovens, fireplaces. So when we turn on our stove, that's the largest amount of gas and chemicals that we get at that point. When we keep the stove on, there's actually less pollutants that are coming at us. So if you're cooking and you have one thing on the stove, you're gonna put something else on that same burner. My advice, keep the burner on low, don't turn it off and turn it back on, because you're actually exposing yourself to more pollutants that way. Same thing with the oven. If you know you're gonna keep something in the oven, don't turn it off, turn it back on. You're exposing yourself to more pollutants. So obviously smoking, terrible indoor pollutant. Things like paints, carpets, and furniture. This might be stuff that you don't really think about all the time. Companies are now more and more aware of the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds in paint. So there's a lot of companies now that have these VOC-free paints. So be mindful if you're, going to paint a room or something soon, or you're moving into a home, moving out of a home and painting to refresh. Look for some of these VOC-free paints because they have much less outgassing that you're breathing into the home. Carpets and furniture are very often made with formaldehyde. I think especially things that are fabric material have much more outgassing than like a natural material such as leather. Although leather can smell from the plastic that it's coated in when you receive it. So if there's any way to keep some of these items in a garage or something to air out before you bring them in the home, it's better for your health because there's a lot of outgassing that happens. Mold. Many homes have mold. And there's really not all that much that can be done to remediate this. If you have mold in your home, the best solution, honestly, is to find another home that doesn't have mold. It's so difficult to get rid of mold, and mold can cause so many health issues. I know it's not the most practical thing to tell somebody to get out of their house, but it's the safest thing to do. So if it's an option, seek another home. Pet dander, synthetic fragrances. We're bombarded with synthetic fragrances. We go to the store and I think I smell everything around me, like just goes right up my nose, and I know it's toxic. You feel that it's toxic. So you will never, you'll feel me smelling on sweat before you'll ever smell me wearing perfume of any kind. It's just not good for you, period. To spray something that you're inhaling constantly, those are just toxins. Now, we do have things like essential oils that are made from natural botanicals, and if you find a good, reputable company, those are perfectly safe because they're not adding any chemicals in there. But synthetic fragrances that we find in cleaning products, air fresheners, candles, things like that, throw them out. That's my motto on those. Now, what are some things that we can do to improve our air quality? Ventilation, obviously opening the windows. If you can open windows such that the air is moving from room to room, that's even better. Exhaust fans, especially in the kitchen, in the bathrooms, and air purifiers. The picture there is of an air purifier that we actually have in our home. I believe I listed this on your handout, the one that we have, the triadair.com. There's many different types of filters, different technologies and whatnot. I'll leave that up to you to look into that, but when we started using an air filter, it was like a night and day difference. The air actually felt crisp, and I think you couldn't smell things anymore. We have one that has a UV filter and ozone that we use when we are not at home. You don't want to breathe in too much ozone, but I highly, highly recommend looking into getting an air filter, even if it's not this one. So the second thing that we need for a healthy life, clean water. Ray mentioned that my first degree was in biochemistry, and my first job when I started working was for a German company that produced laboratory equipment, and my job was going to mostly water and wastewater treatment facilities to teach them how to use the equipment. And the things that I learned there, I have kept with me my entire life. But one thing I want to share with you is that there are many parts of even this area that we live in. The further we get from the lake, the more wastewater is used as our drinking water. So they literally take the wastewater, filter it, and it's put into our drinking water. Now, most of the areas, and I think Elmhurst included, are getting their water from Lake Michigan, so it's filtered Lake Michigan water. But if we go to areas like Roselle, further west, they're actually using about 40%. This was 15 years ago. I believe now it's probably even more areas that are using this because we're running out of fresh water more and more. So 40% of drinking water, stuff that's coming from the tap that people are using to cook with, is actually filtered wastewater. It's a scary thought. So I looked up the city of Elmhurst, since that's where we are now, and I looked at their water quality report, and these are some of the things that that I've found out that they actually list. There's a lot of things I learned, but I don't think many of these things are required to be actually exposed to the public, which is a little bit scary. But this is on the water quality report. It says contaminants that may be present in water include microbials, so those are, bacteria, viruses, parasites, things like that. Inorganic contaminants, which can be things like heavy metals, industrial or domestic wastewater discharge, which I mentioned, pesticides and herbicides. Obviously, I think by now we're all aware how many pesticides and herbicides have made their way into the water, into the soil. We're bombarded with that stuff. Organic chemical contaminants, synthetic and volatile compounds, basically all kinds of stuff from water runoff, from industrial complexes, and then radioactive contaminants. So these are things that are actually in our drinking water, our tap water. This stuff cannot all be filtered out with the mechanisms that water treatment plants use. So if you do not have anything to filter your water and you're just drinking directly from the tap and using, your tap water for cooking purposes, then you are exposing yourself to these things on a daily basis. This is in the water. I was surprised to read this comment. It says, some people may be more vulnerable to contaminants in drinking water than the general population. Immunocompromised persons, such as persons with cancer, undergoing chemotherapy, persons who have undergone organ transplants, people with HIV, AIDS, or other immune system disorders, some elderly and infants can be particularly at risk from infections due to water. These people should seek advice about drinking water from their healthcare providers. Is this not laughable? When was the last time you spoke with your doctor about drinking water and whether or not it was a good thing to drink water? My guess is probably never. Never? While this is a little bit laughable, it's also sad that this is our water, right? But there are things that we can do to try to mitigate the situation as it is. So I can't read this from here, but these are some of the things that are actually required by law to be in the water quality report. So it lists things like chlorine that's added to the water to clean it, nitrates that usually come from industrial waste, fluoride that's added, just a lot of other contaminants. Not everything is required to be in the water quality report, so these are just minimal things that they even list. We can guarantee that there's well over 100 different contaminants in our water. And if you're curious, the website elmhurst.org//water quality report, but every town will have one. So I wanted to talk a little bit about fluoride. I don't think we have any time to go over every one of these chemicals in the water, but did you know that 97% of the Western Europe does not fluoridate their water? So they give us the idea here that, fluoride is good for the teeth and that's why we're adding it, but fluoride really should not be ingested. If it's good for your teeth, then it's good topically for your teeth, but not internal. Many children exceed the recommended daily fluoride intake just from toothpaste alone, and if they're drinking water from the tap, then they're getting well above what is legally recommended or allowed. The CDC says that 41% of children in America have dental fluorosis, which is a discoloration of the teeth and a sort of modeling of the enamel, like white spots, hard spots. I will again say fluoride is not a nutrient. It is not something our body actually needs. And there's currently 74 studies that link fluoride with a reduced IQ in children. So I'm not even making this up. You can find these studies all over the place. There's 23 plus human studies and over 100 animal studies that link fluoride to brain damage in general. And this is in our drinking water. There was a Harvard analysis also on fluoride. It's a big meta-analysis where they study a lot of different studies. And they came to the conclusion that fluoride may cause neurotoxicity, including effects on learning and memory. And fluoride concentrations in the blood are associated with high intakes of drinking water, and they can exceed more than 1,000 times the level of other neurotoxicants that cause developmental damage. So fluoride is a big deal, especially for young kids who are developing. Now, these are some of the detailed effects of fluoride on the brain. This is more sort of scientific, but I do want to point out that fluoride can cause the formation of beta amyloid plaques, which is what is found in Alzheimer's disease. So, we talked about children and how it affects children's IQ and children's development, but it really affects all of us to some degree, and we're starting to see it more and more in the senior population. Another thing is iodine deficiency. Iodine deficiency is something that is ranked up there with some of the nutrients that we're most deficient in, especially here in the United States. So we talk a lot about vitamin D being vitamin D deficient, or something like magnesium. A lot of the population is deficient in magnesium, but we're also deficient in iodine, many of us. And what happens in the body is when we're drinking fluoride, it actually competes for iodine. So if we don't have enough iodine, then fluoride takes over. And then places where we need iodine, and one of the most important is the thyroid, we find more and more people with thyroid disorders because of this interaction. That interaction also happens with chloride ion, so chlorine as well, not just fluoride. But these two things, both of them are in our tap water, so we need to be mindful of those. Now, these are some of the risks associated with fluoride: acne, skin issues, hypertension, the calcification of arteries, iodine deficiency, bone weakness, bone fractures, bone cancer, cognitive deficits, dental fluorosis, a lot of different things. And one of the reasons why you'll see things like bone cancer, or bone weakness, bone fracture, just like fluoride is competing for iodine in the thyroid, it also competes for different minerals in the bones. So again, many different contaminants in the water. So what is our solution then to this problem? Filtration. Filtration of various kinds. Now, in our home, we have multiple types of filters. We have a whole house water filter. We have a filter on top of that for the water that we use to cook with, for drinking water. We're also in the process of installing filters on our shower to filter out the chlorine that we're inhaling constantly when we're showering. So all of us should have some type of filtration in our home. And I actually want to go in a little bit of detail on the different types of filters. You'll see many different filters all over the place. I know Brita is a popular brand that you find in Costco and different stores, but I believe a Brita filter is mostly just a carbon filter, and it's more for taste and for smell purposes and removing chlorine. It doesn't do much of anything else. So the mechanical filters will remove big particles. Carbon filter removes things like chlorine, and it sort of gets rid of that smell and taste of the water. Then you have something called activated carbon, which removes more types of chlorine and volatile organic compounds, pesticides. Reverse osmosis, which on its own removes a lot of different things. Metals, fluoride, nitrates, pesticides, VOCs, chlorine, minerals, bacteria. If I would have to pick just one, I would pick reverse osmosis, with the caveat that it's also removing healthy minerals that we actually need, things like calcium, magnesium, things like that from the water. So if we have a reverse osmosis filter, we want to make sure to include some minerals back into the water, or take some kind of mineral supplement as well, so that you're getting those minerals that we would normally get from drinking water. Another type of water filtration, ion exchange. This is particularly useful for removing radioactive compounds, which we saw in the water quality report, that there are radioactive compounds that make their way into the water. Then we have things like a submicron filter, UV filter for bacteria, viruses, and so on. On the slide, you have 2 different websites where you'll find a lot of information. Make sure that if you didn't get the handout, that you have one of these handouts. I tried to include most of the informative websites in the handout. So these 2 websites, you'll find a lot more details about each type of filter, and they have a lot of different recommendations on water filters. It's obviously best to have a combination of methods. As you saw in the previous slide, there's many different types of filtration methods, but they don't all remove everything. So it's best to have, like I said, a combo. If it's too difficult, to do all of this, I understand all of these things can be kind of pricey, then my recommendation is reverse osmosis does the most work. If you have one, have a reverse osmosis filter. The one in the picture is called AquaTrue. It's something that we keep in our home on the counter. So in addition to our whole house filter and our RO filter on our sink, we also have this filter that we use for our drinking water. And the picture in the circle, it has 4 different types of filtrations in this one. And it's very practical. There's a handle that you can lift, the top portion out, so you can, easily add the water into it to be filtered. It's just one that plugs in. It's not connected to anything, so there's no plumbing required or anything like that. And again, I'm not affiliated with AquaTrue. This is just what I use, so. Now we get to the question of bottled water. Be mindful that something that's in the bottle doesn't necessarily mean that it's filtered, and there's no law requiring the label to say that it could be actually tap water. So you could be paying for tap water. But the biggest concern when it comes to bottled water is the plastic that's leaching into products. Bisphenol A, or BPA, is something that's thrown around a lot. It's in a lot of different materials, but especially in plastic products. We can find it in can linings as well, dental sealants, and all of those paper receipts that you receive at the store. So BPA is something we're exposed to a lot, and it actually disrupts the normal functioning of estrogen in the body. So it tries to take the place of estrogen, which is why we see in the population now more and more hormonal imbalances. And there's a lot of studies linking BPA to infertility as well as cancer. You'll see on a lot of products, they'll list BPA-free, no BPA, things like that. Well, that's great that we're moving in the right direction. Now there's something called BPS. It's sort of in the same family of components. And at this moment, nobody's really labeling things BPS free. So we really need to be mindful to keep away from plastics, especially when it comes to food packaging, food containers, things like that. Even things like the little plastic bags, that you'll put a sandwich in. Much of that stuff is lined with this BPA, or BPS, which is one of the new ones that they're using. The slide doesn't want to work when I press it the first time. Moving on to personal care products. There's many different chemicals that are used in personal care products, but one that maybe we hear most about, one chemical, is parabens. So the Journal of Applied Toxicology published a study that was done in the UK where they took breast tissue from 40 different women that had primary breast cancer. And they found in this study that 99% of the tissue that they tested contained parabens. So parabens are chemicals found in lotion, sunscreen, deodorant, just various personal care products, as well as pharmaceutical drugs. They can even be in food additives, and it's used as a preservative. And again, with a lot of these chemicals, you'll see a common theme. They're disrupting our hormones. They cause developmental and reproductive toxicity, immunotoxicity, allergies, and even cancer. When it comes to parabens, there's many different kinds of parabens, so it's not just, a molecule called paraben, but there's all kinds of different ones, ethyl paraben, butyl paraben, and so on. And currently there's no regulation of these parabens in our products. Now I do want to point out also, when it comes to cosmetics, there is a website that deals a lot with chemicals and cosmetics, and they actually list all hundreds of chemicals that we'll encounter in our cosmetics. The website is called safecosmetics.org. I believe it's also in your handout. So lots of resources for you to go back and dig on your own. The FDA, as I said, does not regulate parabens, but it doesn't regulate the safety of personal care or cosmetic products in general. Instead, there is a panel called the Cosmetic Ingredient Review that says yay or nay to the things that are allowed in these products. One of the problems is this panel is funded by the industry, so their level of biasness, I would say, is probably really high, and that should concern us. These are some of the other more common harmful ingredients in personal care products. Toluene, which is a petrochemical, BHA, BHT, those are endocrine disruptors, they're carcinogenic. Phthalates, and here's where we get kind of sneaky. Sometimes these phthalates are just listed on the label as fragrance. So anything that has the word fragrance in it, I try to stay away. Then we have propylene glycol, which is a skin irritant, triclosan, an endocrine disruptor. Triclosan is found in a lot of soaps. Then synthetic colors, which are made from petrochemicals or tar. And then you have these blanket terms like fragrance, perfume, parfum, aroma. They, sound so exotic when they start getting into naming them, in European ways or something. But what that is an umbrella for just many different chemicals. And we don't really know what they are. Parabens we talked about, sodium lauryl and laureth sulfate. This is a chemical that's found in some 90% of personal care products. And something, again, that we want to avoid as it's a hormone disruptor and cancer causing and so forth. And then there's even things like formaldehyde, which is a known carcinogenic, has been a known carcinogenic for years, but we'll find it in personal care products. So if you take almost nothing from this lecture, because it's hard to focus, you've been here all day, all morning, let me wake you up now and say, please remember this website, Environmental Working Group, EWG.org. It is listed on the handout, so if you have the handout, it is there. Environmental Working Group is an independent organization, very large organization now, and their goal is to educate the public on all kinds of products that we're exposed to. You can see the list there: food and water, farming and agriculture, personal care, household products, energy, family health, toxic chemicals, and they get into regional issues as well. Their website has a plethora of information. They also have databases, a water database and a food database and a skincare database. And the picture up there, I haven't downloaded this myself. I usually just go to their website, but they do have an application. So I'm going to encourage everybody here, if you have a smartphone, download the application from EWG, the Environmental Working Group. And as you go and purchase some of these products for yourself, your home, when it comes to personal care, household products, they have nearly every product and every brand listed on their website. You can pull up moving on to the next slide, you can pull up the Actually, I'm going to go one more. Each product, and it'll list the ingredients, the health concerns associated with each ingredient, and it rates the ingredients and the product as a whole. So you have from best to worst, best being the ones in the green, 1 and 2, and worst being the numbers in the red, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this particular product, the eyeshadow palette, this was on the very last page of makeup that they ranked. So it's one of the worst makeup brands and makeup products that you can find in the store. And going back to this one, so each product will have a really long page, but the number 5 is the overall score. So this is a product, for example, that I would have used as a teenager or a young adult because I didn't know any better, and it ranked pretty high in comparison to other stuff that's available now that's more clean. So again, if you forget anything from this lecture, please remember this website. It's a plethora of information. Take the app with you when you're shopping for different products, and you'll be able to find things that are better for you. There was a huge study done on sunscreen, and because we're entering summer, I wanted to mention this. It was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association just 2 years ago, and they found that all of the common active ingredients in sunscreen, except for 2, which are on the next page, but all of those that are listed get directly absorbed into the bloodstream at toxic levels. So especially people who have kids who are going to be outside and applying sunscreen and reapplying, be very mindful of the sunscreens that are out there. So according to the study done by the FDA, there were actually only 2 active ingredients in sunscreen that are found to be safe: zinc oxide and titanium dioxide. Now, I am actually going to go one step further to say that I don't really even want to encounter titanium dioxide in my sunscreen because it's still titanium. It's not really natural to us, not something that we want. So the brands I have here are things that I've used, that I use with my kids. Badger and California Baby are 2 brands that you'll find on the EWG site that can be found on many store shelves, places like Target and whatnot. The one with the website Butterbean Organics, I don't see in the store, but I order from them directly. They have much more green idea behind everything they do. So Butterbean Organics, California Baby, Badger, those are some brands to look into. But one thing I want you to all be mindful of is aerosol sprays. So while things like zinc oxide and titanium dioxide are found to be okay, anything that's sprayed and your child is ingesting it, it's not meant to be ingested. So especially with young kids, you need to be very careful. And I would go so far as saying just don't use the spray. This stuff is meant to be on your skin and stay on top of your skin. They're large particles that don't get absorbed, which is why they're deemed safe. But if you're ingesting them, then there's no way for you to protect that child from getting those toxins away. So, like I said, EWG has a section on household products as well. The American Journal of Respiratory and Critical Care published a study that was done by universities in Norway, where they actually followed 6,235 people over the course of more than 20 years, and they monitored their lung function. What they found was that cleaning your house may actually be as bad as smoking 20 cigarettes a day. So with the household chemicals that most people use, cleaning your house can actually be worse than smoking. Isn't that something? Who would think? Now, I'm not suggesting that you don't clean your house, especially women. I don't want Let's not anger the husbands. And we all want a clean house. But this was also very interesting to me, that the research found that women who cleaned, whether it was just once a week or people who do it professionally for a living, had a greater decline in their lung capacity, whereas men were not really affected. So yeah, how about we get some men that step up and clean the house? Give your woman a break. Her hormones need a break from everything. So. Yeah, very, very interesting that it can be as bad as smoking 20 cigarettes a day. So that should tell you. Are you talking about me now back there? Well, I'm not the one that did the study. I'm sure there were many men who who actually did the research, but let this be a wake-up call to be more mindful about the chemicals that you're using in your home. Ammonia, bleach, things with volatile organic compounds, all of these are leading to respiratory issues, those lung issues that we're seeing in these studies, allergic reactions, headaches. This stuff can even cause cancer. On the front sheet of my handout, I actually give you two different alternatives that you can make at home. So homemade bleach alternative and homemade all-purpose cleaner. So, there's many things you can do yourself, but there's also many brands that are out there that use much cleaner products. So when it comes to household chemicals, the manufacturers are not required by law to provide a list of the ingredients that are in the product. But the EPA does have a website, epa.gov/safer choice, where you can find better brands that use cleaner ingredients and ingredients without any harmful chemicals. This should also be on your handout as well. So these are some of the brands that I had mentioned before. Very easy to find, Safer Generation. You see it in places like Target, Walmart, even various grocery stores. My Pete's Market has it, Mariano's has it. So this is one of those brands that they actually do disclose their ingredients, and you can see a full list of what's there, but there's many, many of these brands out there. Like I said, this one's an easy one to find. And then I had mentioned the one I use also for laundry care, Clean People. And this one I buy online. And what's neat is for their laundry detergent, it actually comes in very tiny strips. So you're actually saving packaging and saving the environment as well by using some of these products. Next, we're going to just mention food briefly. Obviously, food in itself could be probably a whole weekend lecture when we're talking about food and food safety, but I'm going to save most of it for another time. I do want to mention that the Environmental Working Group, EWG, every year comes out with a list of their Dirty Dozen, and this list actually came out a few days ago, which is why I decided to include this in here. So the Dirty Dozen is a list of the foods that contain the most pesticides, most pesticides that are sprayed on the agriculture. In general, I will say that anytime you think of a fruit or vegetable that has thin skin, which is why you see stuff like berries, grapes, peaches, their skin is very thin, that stuff gets absorbed very easily. So even without necessarily knowing the Dirty Dozen from year to year, anything with thin skin is going to absorb the pesticides more and more. So something like an avocado, for example, probably isn't going to be absorbing as many pesticides. So anytime possible, at least these 12 you should try to buy organic, because it will have presumably no pesticides. I know, sometimes there's an organic farm next to a non-organic farm, and these things blow as the wind blows, but it should still have less contamination if you buy organic. So we had the Dirty Dozen, and now here is a list of the Clean 15. Avocados, sweet corn, pineapples, onions, you can read the list there. Papaya, sweet peas, asparagus, honeydew melon, kiwi, cabbage, mushrooms, cantaloupe, mangoes, watermelon, sweet potatoes. So these are things that don't seem to be absorbing the pesticides as much. So less important for these to be organic, although obviously I would encourage all of you to get organic produce as much as possible. And then there's a note that even though sweet corn, papaya, and things like summer squash make the list for the cleaner products, they can still be genetically modified. Only a couple of weeks ago in the store did I notice that most of the papayas that we buy in the store are genetically modified, but they're actually including it on store labels as well. So underneath the price tag, under papaya at Whole Foods recently, I saw bioengineered. More and more, we're starting to see these labels pop up. So just pay attention to some of this stuff, because some places are making an effort to notify you of these foods that we should try to avoid. So as I was looking at foods, it's very difficult anytime I read something about young kids and babies not to mention most baby products, baby foods, are contaminated with so many different chemicals. These are all various studies that showed the varying degrees of chemicals and toxins, metals, and things like that that are in baby products. The report that's listed on the site is also in your handout. There was a report of baby food, and 95% of them were found to contain toxic chemicals. So if you have a young child or a baby, chances are if you're feeding them stuff that you buy off the store shelf, there's a lot of things in there, a lot of heavy metals especially, arsenic, lead, cadmium. So when possible, obviously it's always better to prepare things on your own, but baby products in particular seem to be loaded with a lot of garbage. So heavy metals, the ones we encounter most often, arsenic, lead, cadmium, and mercury, although there's many others, but these seem to be in more products and things we're exposed to more often. Signs and symptoms of heavy metal toxicity, there's so many of them, and by the time we've gotten to that point, the stuff has been accumulating and probably accumulating over a long period of time. So heavy metals will affect our brain. We notice memory loss, lack of concentration, headaches, irritability, depression, in general, fatigue, joint and muscle pain, cardiovascular issues. Kidneys get damaged and lose function. Reproductive system is damaged. So in a lot of men, we're seeing more and more infertility issues, a decrease of sperm in general. Same as in women also. A lot of these things could be just due to the accumulation of toxins and heavy metals. In children, we see more and more behavioral issues, lower IQ, hearing loss, learning disabilities. Many of those can be attributed to heavy metals and toxins. A decrease of bone and muscle growth, kidney damage, anemia, nerve system damage. All of these things are increasing in our younger population, and we need to be more mindful of these heavy metals and these toxins. So one of the heavy metals that I want to mention is arsenic. It can be found in seafood, but it's interesting that all of the United States has an arsenic problem, and it makes its way into our drinking water, so yet another reason to get a water filter. Something I learned as I was doing this, Brussels sprouts have a high affinity for arsenic. So Brussels sprouts are extremely healthy. I'm not saying to avoid them, but if you're a Brussels sprout eater, you might not want to eat it every day. Juice. I advise all people to stay away from juice. If you're not going to make it yourself, don't buy it from the store. Please don't buy it from the store. 50% of the juices tested had some kind of heavy metals in them, whether it was arsenic, lead, cadmium, and it was in very, very unsafe amounts. Water is and should be our drink of choice. And thanks, Ray. And if you want to add a splash of something in there, it's very easy to add, lemon or orange or something fresh to make your water taste differently, if taste is the problem or you just want to try something different. But juice is laced with a lot of things. Arsenic can be found, obviously, in contaminated soil, and so on. Now, one of the biggest problems of arsenic happens with rice. Rice has a huge affinity for arsenic in all different kinds of rice. Now, again, I'm not suggesting to completely throw out rice from your diet, but simply to be mindful that according to studies that were done, the least amount of arsenic in rice was found to be basmati rice that comes from California, India, and Pakistan. So again, the least amount of rice is basmati that comes from California, India, and Pakistan. In general, brown rice seems to have more arsenic, although brown rice is more nutritious in general, has more nutrients. So as with any food, a diversity is important. I don't think that we should all just jump and buy only basmati because there's other nutrients in the different varieties of rice, but maybe try not to eat rice every day, that sort of thing. Replace it with some of the other grains, millet, amaranth, there's other options, quinoa, things like that. So why is arsenic in rice so prevalent here in the United States? About 50% of the rice that's grown is grown over soil that used to be where cotton was produced down in the South. And that cotton was chemically treated to prevent a particular beetle from eating the cotton. So places like Texas and Arkansas, they're big producers of rice, but they have a really, really high toxin level. So the rice, especially that comes from those areas down south, I do not recommend it. California just has a better arsenic level in general, so it's healthier. But when we think of rice, we don't want to just think of a bag of rice. Rice comes in so many different products. A lot of baby cereals are made with rice, and my advice, just do not touch them. Then we have things like hot cereal, ready to eat, Rice Krispies, things like that, puffed cakes and whatnot. Brown rice syrup, we see that used as a sweetener. So all of these rice products are going to have arsenic in them. There's no question. So how are ways that we can cut down on rice? Cut down on arsenic, drinking pure water, again, having that water filter that's going to filter out some of these contaminants like heavy metals, rinsing the rice before we use it, with using a high water to rice ratio. It actually can remove 30% of the arsenic content in rice, so very important to wash your rice. Again, try other grains, explore millet, quinoa, amaranth, there's other good things, teff. And when it comes to arsenic in juice, my advice is to try to avoid juice altogether, especially apple juice. I know, people like different things, but if you're gonna at least try to be mindful of juice, don't buy it from China. I know a lot of the brands in Walmart, actually, or in Sam's Club, they come from China. So at least try to avoid those brands. Cadmium is another metal we encounter. Dark chocolate is a high source of cadmium, particularly if the chocolate comes from South America. I guess other parts of the world, like Africa, have a less problem with cadmium. Then we see cadmium in fumes from metal processing, supplements. It can also be in juice and ceramic glaze. We'll discuss this one a little bit later. Lead. Lead is another heavy metal that we need to be mindful of. In our drinking water, it mostly comes from our pipes. You know, a lot of this infrastructure has been here for a while, and it has lead, so the lead is leaching into the pipes. And then if you have an old home, there's a lot of lead in these old paints. Gasoline, incinerators, cosmetics contain a lot of lead. Lead, again, is in ceramic glazes, you know, and things that we use every day, plates, china, ceramic pans. Lead is in a lot of children's toys and children's jewelry. There's a lot of brands now that are introducing children's toys and making a point that they're not using lead-based paints and things like that. So look out for some of those products for kids, you know, when you're gifting something to somebody, or, you know, if you have kids or grandkids of your own, try to be mindful. A lot of these toys, especially the ones that come from China, are just laced with lead. Mercury. This is maybe the one that many of us are exposed to that causes some of the heaviest issues. Mercury, is found in a lot of seafood. In general, the larger the fish, the more mercury it contains. So when it comes to fish, smaller fish, anchovies, sardines have some of the lower levels of mercury. Even wild salmon is a good choice. And the FDA has, they have a list of fish with the highest mercury, lowest mercury, so you can find some of these resources online if you have questions. Mercury is also in a lot of pharmaceutical drugs. A big hot topic for a lot of parents, it's in vaccines. There's an organization called the Children's Health Defense. If you're not familiar with it, you have kids, grandkids, and you want to learn more about mercury and vaccines, I suggest you look at the Children's Health Defense. Mercury can be in jewelry, electronics, batteries, light bulbs, and metal amalgams. You know, a lot of us have cavities, unfortunately, and these metal amalgams are almost 50% or up to 50% mercury. And this mercury is releasing gas constantly, mercury vapor in our mouths. And, you know, being so close to our brain is about 60% fat, and heavy metals love fat. Heavy metals stick to fat, so they love to go up into the brain. That's why we're seeing more and more studies linking mercury to cognitive issues, and things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and so forth. So 2 years ago, the FDA came out with a warning that said, the FDA has found that certain groups may be at greater risk for potential harmful health effects of mercury vapor released from the device, meaning mercury amalgams, tooth fillings. As a result, the agency is recommending certain high-risk groups avoid getting dental amalgams whenever possible and appropriate. And they list the high-risk groups as pregnant nursing women, children, people with, you know, various conditions. So they are starting to acknowledge this now more and more. So I would like to introduce you to something called biological dentistry. Just as, you know, in the medical field, we have functional medicine and natural doctors, naturopaths like myself and so forth, there is a field of dentistry that's called biological dentistry. And these dentists are trained in, I will say, maybe a bigger variety of options when it comes to the things that go in our mouths. So in place of things like mercury fillings, There's other stuff, the white composite resins, glass ionomers, porcelain, ceramic, other materials. They're finding that some of these materials have problems of their own. For example, the composite resins, some will use BPA in the sealants, or the glass ionomers are found to have fluorine in them. So these are things that you want to talk to a dentist about, different options. But just be aware that biological dentistry does exist. There is an organization called the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. I list their website in your handout, IAOMT.org. The dentist that I go to, she is considered a smart dentist. Smart meaning safely able to remove mercury amalgams. There's a process that in which that's done safely so that as they're removing the mercury, those vapors aren't released. Not everybody has this technology in their dental offices, so just be aware that there's people who practice biological dentistry and have some of these methods, maybe that not every dentist will be aware about or have the capability of doing. These are some of the symptoms of mercury poisoning. It's very similar to some of the other stuff that we read, a lot of cognitive issues, even weight loss, kidney problems, respiratory. So these are all of the ways that these toxins can cause damage. They increase free radical production. They compete with other nutrients in the body. They replace structural minerals. They damage our DNA, our cells. They block insulin receptors. They create hormone imbalances. So I don't want to go into much more detail on this. I think Ray will probably work on a lecture that will talk more about detoxification in general and more detail on some of these more scientific things. But I do want to just give you brief ways of how we are to cleanse and detoxify, in addition to all of the stuff that you've learned so far. So our skin is our number one barrier for removing toxins. But these toxins go through our cardiovascular system, respiratory system, liver and spleen and kidneys. They all try to remove this stuff in various ways. And then our colon is involved as well. So in order to remove some of these toxins from our body, we need to be mindful of all of these other organs and making sure that our other organs that are involved in detoxification are working properly. So again, more topic for a future lecture, but our liver is very burdened by a lot of this stuff, so we really need to be kind to our liver and do as much as we can to try to protect it. So these are some natural things that we can take on a daily basis to help our liver to function, help our body to function, so that when it's able to remove these toxins, it can try. Things like bilberries, very high in antioxidants, wild blueberries, mushrooms, vitamin C, which helps convert toxins in a water-soluble form so it can be released. Things like red peppers, guavas, black currants, they're very high in vitamin C. Beetroots are very good for the liver. They help break down the toxins in the liver. Garlic and onions, sulfur-containing compounds. My husband talks a lot about MSM, methylsulfonylmethane, a sulfur supplement, which he takes on a daily basis. But if you eat a lot of garlic and onions daily, you're really doing a service to your liver. And here's a liver cleanse that you can do with water, apple cider vinegar, lemon juice, ginger, cinnamon, cayenne, raw honey. Apple cider vinegar improves metabolism, digestive function. Lemon juice raises the pH level in the body. It helps to boost our energy, immune function, and so forth. Cinnamon, cayenne, and ginger, they help reduce inflammation. They help aid in digestion and metabolism. Because again, we want to clear as much stuff out so that we can help our body to digest some of these things and remove them. These are herbs and teas that also help liver gallbladder function: nettle, dandelion, turmeric, ginger, peppermint, milk thistle, chamomile, burdock, chicory. These are things that you can even drink on a daily basis. Now, when it comes to a heavy metal detox, this is much, much more complicating because there are compounds that can take the heavy metals and pull them out of a tissue, say your brain or, liver or something, but then they just drop them. And where they drop them, you can actually create more issues. So I recommend if you want to do any kind of heavy metal detox, it's better to work with a practitioner. Your practitioner is going to make sure that all of your channels for cleaning the body are open. So if you're not going to the bathroom regularly, then doing a heavy metal detox wouldn't be the best thing, because if you cannot eliminate, then that stuff is going to get stuck somewhere. And something like heavy metals, it can take months to years to remove these heavy metals from the body. And so that they're not dumped back in, there are particular products, supplements, or foods that work well together. So one will take the metal from the tissue, another one will grab onto it and hold onto it so that it can be expelled from the body. But these are things that, like I said, probably better to work with a practitioner. Another thing, when you're going through any kind of a detox, it can be very burdensome on the body. Can cause fatigue or something called a Herxheimer reaction. A Herxheimer reaction, as you're detoxifying the body, there's all kinds of symptoms that people can have that are almost like flu-like symptoms. And this is actually normal, but if you're not aware, you could you could think that something else is going on with you, but it's simply your body trying to get rid of these toxins. Obviously, when doing any kind of a detox, it's important to drink water, and not just any water, but filtered water of some kind, especially reverse osmosis filtered. And there are particular foods which are more helpful for doing detox. So again, this is something that we'll maybe talk about in a future lecture. Here's another idea for a heavy metal detox smoothie, something that you can do more often. Now, while I say this, things like cilantro, if you do take too much, or barley grass, spirulina, chlorella, these are compounds that are binding to the toxins, so you actually might experience some of those symptoms that I mentioned. So I suggest if you do any of these things, take it slowly, maybe reduce the dosages, give yourself breaks in between. So maybe do this for a few days, take a week break. Don't just do it consistently. It puts a lot of burden on the body. And again, if you are not going to the bathroom regularly, which when I say regularly, I mean every day, 3 times a day, then this is probably not something that you want to do on your own. And with that, I really like this picture. I wish we could all be that relaxed and happy and in an awesome environment, drinking our coconut milk directly from the coconut and enjoying the beautiful air and sunshine and water. But we are here to do the best that we can and be mindful of the things that we can change. So with that, thank you. My email is listed on the handout, and you can see it up there, purelifehealth@yahoo.com. I'm happy to answer any questions or point you out in a direction on things that I may not have covered. Yes, question?
Okay, so I'm looking into water distillation.
Yes.
Right now, for me, it makes more sense to, because I'm just one person, and for my drinking water and my cooking water, I'm interested in using as pure water as possible. I don't trust the water, the distilled water in the store, and most of the time I can't find it. So, are you aware of any kind of water distillation equipment that might be, or any procedures? I'm assuming that probably the best thing to papers that might describe, you know, the best water distillation procedures for this type of thing?
Off the top of my head, the question was regarding water distillation. Yeah, he was asking about, and do you want to join me for questions as well, Ray? You can come up here. The question was regarding water distillation. Any tips or tricks on, you know, best ways or products to do it with? I will say in general, I don't think distillation is the best way to go. Most experts agree that reverse osmosis is better than distillation. You want to answer, Ray? Sure, you can come up here. Oh, you're going to give the mic? Okay.
Yes, keep it just here next
Yeah,
to
you
each
can do
other.
this.
Distillation, just think about this. You're having the vapor goes into the air. But there are many chemicals that can end up in the vapor. They're going to end on the other side, right? So distillation is a pretty good method, but there are many chemical pests that will end up in distilled water as well. So reverse osmosis is the best known filter to us to remove most of the toxins.
So I said most experts will agree that reverse osmosis is the way to go and not distillation.
So I understand that straight distillation is probably not going to be the best way to go, but when you purify a liquid in the laboratory, you generally distill it,
Right.
and that gives you purest. I mean, it's not necessarily, I mean, that's an organic liquid or whatever. But I mean, what I'm thinking is there something, is there diatomaceous earth or charcoal or something like that? I'm looking for a cheap way to do this. I don't necessarily want to buy a reverse osmosis system. You know,
Yeah, reverse osmosis can be bought for like $150. It's really not expensive, yeah. They're not really the best for $150, but yes, for $150 you can go to Home Depot and buy one. But one that Andjela mentioned that we have at home is usually on sale for $300. It's really not that much. So system itself, if you even go to buy in the store water on the machine, to buy filter is much less expensive than any option. So you spend $200, $300 on a filter, but it's going to last you 10, 20 years, and it comes to about half a penny a gallon. So really, the water filtration system is no-brainer pretty much for anybody. It's cheaper than any other option. Before, I used to go to Whole Foods, and there was this big dispensing machine. You pay 50 cents a gallon. At home, costs you half a cent a gallon. So any of the system, as I said, for $150, you can buy a reverse osmosis filter. It's not a big deal at all. Better ones are maybe 500, you know. Still on the large scale, in 1 year, in 6 months, you're going to pay it off. They're being used. Yeah. Distilled water used in the laboratory, they usually start already with semi-clean water. If the filter in some other way, so that's a different story. There are some other things we can talk about distilled water, but it really would take a long time. Just based on my many decades of experience, reverse osmosis alone is not enough. Most of these systems have a sediment filter, pre-filter, reverse osmosis post-filter, and some of them have ionization, UV light. So that's why I said the difference between $150 filter and $500 is maybe that kind of stuff. But still, when you look at the large scale, with these 6 months, most people will pay it off. Okay? And we can discuss later if you want me to give you specific advice, you know, whatever your price range is. Yeah, let me just give you a microphone so she doesn't have to repeat.
Can you address vinegar as a cleaning agent?
In household products? Yes. Yes, vinegar is a great cleaning agent, Ray?
Yeah, that I have nothing else to add.
I believe one of the, I think I put one in here. Maybe I didn't have more space. You can find many different formulas that will give you recipes using vinegar and lemon and things like that for making your own household products, absolutely.
Yeah, lemon is great, vinegar is great. Good idea. Any other questions? Maybe if you don't mind
I have a question about the rice that you mentioned, because you said stay away from rice in America, but what about rice for the other rest of the world? Or just, you know what I mean?
Rice, basmati rice from California,
No, I don't mean basmati rice, just rice, because
rice in general.
I'm a Brazilian.
Yeah. So that's a huge topic. There's so many different varieties of rice. I actually give you the website that lists the study. There's hundreds of different varieties, and they'll show you how it relates to other types of rice and where it's. So, we have brown rice from here, from there, whatever, but it's not all the same. It depends on the soil where the rice grows. So I suggest look at that list, and you'll find all different kinds that are lower in the heavy metals.
The situation here is not very good. The studies around the world show that over 90% of the rice is full of arsenic. Yeah, so this water world is so commercialized that everything comes from these big suppliers. It's rarely now you're going to go to a farm in Mexico and get it, unless you travel to Mexico. So the bottom line is, if you know where the rice was grown, if it's far away from some commercial places, probably fine. But rice grows in water, where there's a lot of solution of heavy metals, and somehow rice attracts more arsenic than the other places. We use rice maybe once a month. And we get it from Costco, one that is from Pakistan, I believe. So we are minimizing we used to use much more rice before, now it's maybe once or twice a month maximum, small amount. Mostly, what she mentioned, look at the grains like quinoa, millet, buckwheat. Those are great grains that are actually healthier even than rice, and just try to minimize rice once or twice a month. Ultimately, what she mentioned here, we are full of toxins everywhere. You need to decide for yourself how far you're going to go with this battle, right? It may be not rice for you, maybe just deodorants, removing deodorants, changing your toothpaste, that kind of stuff, right? The idea is here to be informed and then, just make decision step by step.
And we also want to make sure to diversify our diets. So not just eating one kind over and over again. Yeah. Where do I practice? We actually practice out of our home in Lisle.
We are starting 2 new practices on the south side that will be multidisciplinarian. So you can grab her card at the end, but there's multiple places where you can come visit us, or other doctors who do this kind of stuff.
I saw some other hands. Yeah.
There's a good water filtration company right in Villa Park on St. Charles Road, Johnson Water Conditioning. And they have a really good RO system that I pay $20 a month. They install it, they put it in the basement. The tube comes up. You can put it in refrigerators. They change the filters, and everything. So it's and plus they got whole house stuff, and it's a good company, Johnson Water Conditioning, right on St. Charles Road, and they got a couple other locations in the suburb area.
Ultimately, what is the bottom line? Do something, especially with water. Water is 70% of your body is water, which is really not water, it's a lymph fluid, cardiovascular system. If I were to say something, what to do first, start with the water first. Water is so impervious, it's so present everywhere. Invest $500 and get a good water filtration system. It's probably the least expensive stuff, because if you look at the pots and pans you may need to change, or I don't know what else. Water is probably the least expensive and the most significant first step to make. Personally, that's my personal thinking.
Thank you, Andjela, for the very nice lecture. I just had an observation. It just seems to me that just anywhere you go or anywhere you look at, there's going to be some type of issue with contamination, depending on the soil, on the water, or anything like that, with food or anything you can think about. What about wouldn't you mostly recommend that you just farm your own vegetables, your own fruits? Because when it comes down to it, other than that, you have a little bit more control over what you're doing,
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, ideally, we would all
Yeah.
be living somewhere outside and not
Yeah.
indoors, and be breathing fresh air and drinking, fresh water from a freshwater source
Yes.
that's clean, away
Yeah.
from factories and everything.
absolutely.
But our realities are such that, most of us are going to work, coming home, busy with kids, busy with this, busy with that,
Yeah.
and it's just not a practicality. So
Yeah.
whatever we're able to do,
Then we can do.
Yeah.
One last thing. What about that in opposed to hydroponic means to be able to obtain that? Is that safer than to do when you do it yourself? Is that safer? And the only reason I'm asking is I don't know.
yeah, so.
Is it?
Yes and no. When you do things hydroponically, then you have to actually add in nutrients. When you're getting things from the soil, then you're getting nutrients from the soil, you're also getting the bad stuff. So it's kind of a give and take
It
situation.
depends what you put in the soil.
Right, right.
Nutrients absorbed. In the next lecture, we'll probably go into some supplements and things you can do. We have a mercy of God now that we have certain supplements, which is natural products. If I want to mention one today, look at the N-acetylcysteine. N-acetylcysteine is stuff that will take away a lot of toxins from your liver.
Ray, you're going to be cut from the
Liver and
internet
kidneys
now.
are the most attacked organs in the body. So consider
No,
to-
I meant you're going to be cut from the internet for saying NAC.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so FDA is trying to now take away from the market N-acetylcysteine for no reason.
So get it while you can is
So
the
get
whole
it while
point.
you can. We have some supply at home. We actually bought probably 50, 100 bottles. They should have enough. But N-acetylcysteine is a great way to why? Because your liver goes through 2 phases of detoxification. And first we start with these very nasty chemicals, and they have to become less nasty to go to step 2 and then eliminate out of the body. And acetylcysteine is a crucial in this phase 1, phase 2 liver detox for that process to be done properly. That's going to cost you maybe $5 a month. Anybody can afford that? $5 a month maybe. And acetylcysteine, 1 capsule a day, will probably aid your body to keep staying clean. But we'll discuss more of this in the next lecture in terms of what kind of detox you can do, maybe once a year, and what you can do daily to minimize some toxins in terms of the stuff you're going to do, not just avoid.
So NAC, just to
NAC.
mention briefly, is a sulfur compound, which garlic and onions also have a lot of sulfur in them as well. But when you take 1 capsule of a concentrated supplement, you're getting much more of the active component than you would. You'd have to probably eat like 10 onions at once to get the amount of the active component.
Yeah, I'll explain to you. Glutathione is not easily absorbed. It's actually, your body makes glutathione. If you take selenium and N-acetylcysteine, your body will make glutathione. It's better. Now, glutathione gets absorbed, but on a lower percentage rate than N-acetylcysteine. N-acetylcysteine gets absorbed very easily, and then body will manufacture glutathione based on N-acetylcysteine and selenium. And there are some other things, again, we'll discuss this in the next lecture. Any other questions? Okay, so she was asking water filtration. We have at home several water filtration systems. The main one I would recommend for you to get is aquatrue.com. She had
I'm going
it
to go
somewhere
back
here,
to the picture.
In other words, go to website. They cost $450, but every month they have a sale for $300, almost regularly. So if you just wait long enough, you're going to get a sale. So $300. Why do we like this filter? Because you don't have to even have plumbing. You just plug it into electricity. Put dirty water on one side, clean water comes out. I have seen commercial where they put Coca-Cola and pure water comes out. That's
So
how
this is a
pure.
picture of the filter he's talking about.
That one, yes.
It has 2 components. So you fill in the back, there's a tank where you actually fill the water. So you take your tap water, fill it up. Somebody's phone is ringing, I thought it was mine. And then it goes through those 4 filters and comes out in that front jug, which you can then take and, if you're gonna cook with it, you can dump, whatever. And it has a spigot in the front, so you can just use a glass for drinking and stuff like that. It's very convenient. And they have, I have an extra front tank, so, I keep a lot of water handy.
So this is the least expensive good solution. There's some other, if you want, you can email us. I'll send you, there's some filter for $900, there's one for $500. They're more expensive solution, but you have to do the plumbing. This one, you don't have to do any plumbing, just plug it into electricity.
And the maintenance, there's only one filter that gets changed maybe every 6 months. The other ones last much longer, 1 to 2 years, and they're not very expensive to change. One of the filters is maybe $50. That one is the most expensive. The one you change most often is like $25 or so, and you're only doing this every so often. And then there's one other descaling thing that cleans the minerals that accumulate from the filtration. So pretty easy and inexpensive to maintain altogether.
Also, cook with that water, make tea with that water. Do not use tap water for anything that goes to be ingested in the body.
Just a little concern about talking about these things on the Sabbath. We are talking about selling on the Sabbath. It's not appropriate.
I think, well, I understand your concern. She was concerned that we are talking on the Sabbath about something. We really, we are not, because what is wrong on the Sabbath is to sell something. Like if you had a profit, or we are trying to sell something, we are just explaining a solution that, like Jesus was healing on the Sabbath. We are talking about how to achieve optimal health, right? So if you do not want to discuss that, you can just send us email later on. Nobody's selling here anything. We're just explaining to you the process, and that this is something that is affordable for most families. And if it's not, reach out to church. Maybe church will help you, because we really would like to help people to be healthy. That's the bottom line. Anybody who has any kind of work should be able to afford this, but if it's not, just talk to us. We'll try to help you. Any other question?
Or I'll take a comment, if not a question. Florin, you always have something to say. I'm kidding.
Let's see.
Yeah.
It's my understanding that no matter what you do with your air filtration, you're still going to have some pollutants in your house. How can you get rid of those inside your body if you get it? Yes.
Yeah, all of the ways we talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, lecture will talk much more about solutions, what you can do daily. This is to present a problem and some specific things to minimize. Awareness is a big deal, because most people, I don't know, when we were going to this lecture, there was a lot of stuff that was new to me, even though I'm doing this for so long. Awareness, how much toothpaste, deodorants, everything you do, the clothing you have on yourself, how everything affects you. Now, don't get paranoid. The problem is just make some steps, right? Because cancer is growing, all the growing, and nothing comes suddenly. It's accumulation of things. Open your window on a regular basis, even if it's a little bit cold. Even if this air is toxic outside, it's several thousand times less toxic than the air inside. So every day, open the windows at least once for 5-10 minutes a day to recirculate air, right? Again, whole idea is to be aware of this stuff, because Bible says our body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. We need to keep our body clean in order for our spirit and our mind to function properly, right?
So let me give you a very brief explanation of why sometimes there's no easy answer to answer his question. So let's say we're inhaling something over and over and over again, and our lungs start producing mucus to try to expel whatever that is. And then we take a cough suppressant to keep ourselves from coughing, so whatever's there just stays there, and it keeps going through our body, right? And then maybe that mucus is causing an accumulation of bacteria that's already in our body, but candida to explode, for example. But then that candida shows up as, I don't know, name anything. Candida will show up as psoriasis, like what I had. So you don't necessarily even realize that the stuff you're coming in is being expressed that it's an issue in a completely different way than you expect. But that's essentially what functional medicine is, and how functional medicine tries to go backwards to see where root issues are coming from. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Okay, and any other questions? The idea of this series of lectures, we do not know exactly how often we're going to do this, maybe every 2-3 months, is really just education. And then if you make one step at a time, nobody can change their life overnight in every way. But you make step at a time, we're a step at a time. And in a year or two, suddenly your life is different. Change your toothpaste, change the water, right? Put air filtration system, maybe every year, something else. All these things in the long run is going to give you less burden.
For me, it's empowering to know that we have options, right?
Yeah.
So look at it that way. We have options, there are better things, and there might be something else even better. But now, as we become more aware, then we're more aware of what we're doing to make a step in the right direction.
Yeah. And to me, as those who know me, you know, you grew up as atheists in Yugoslavia, and when I started coming to Seventh-day Adventist Church, to me that was kind of one of the drawing points that this church pays attention to the body, pays attention to health, that we are taking it seriously, that we're not just talking about church and God, we are talking about the whole life as it is. And then being healthy is a big deal. And that's, I'm proud that our church is doing that we are living in real world and paying attention to health, to promote health, because, that's really important, right? So we're going to continue this series of educational stuff. Next time we're going to go even deeper in some practical things you can do, but you can propose else. It's just a learning process. Well,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for coming, but you know what? Invite more people next time. We thought it was going to be filled.